Hello there and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Friday, April 12th, 2024, the 15th Friday of the year, the second Friday of the month, and it's International Day of Human Spaceflight, a global celebration of human exploration from the first manned mission into space, all of those that followed, including the landing on the moon, the first woman in space, and the International Space Station, and sending people to the International Space Station. It is a big day over at Cape Canaveral in Florida, I imagine. On the food calendar, it's hashtag National Grilled Cheese Day, which no doubt has coworkers and family members debating right now whether you put sliced tomato on it or not, and if you eat it with tomato soup or not. The soup is a hard no for me, but I do like it with or without the tomato. Topping the news this Friday, a statement from the White House says the Biden administration will cancel $7.4 billion in student debt to the benefit of about 277,000 people. Emails are going out to those people today, mostly young people who the president hopes will then vote for him, even after the Supreme Court ruled against his earlier attempts at much larger numbers of loan forgiveness. The Biden administration moving forward with it. And all eyes are on Capitol Hill today for a vote to renew FISA, which I'll get to in a bit. But once again, after nearly 30 years, the country is again captivated by OJ Simpson, who passed away yesterday.
News just coming into the newsroom here. OJ Simpson has died at the age of 76. Again, this confirmed by his family on X, formerly Twitter. The tweet reads from OJ's account this: on April 10th, our father, Orenthal James Simpson, succumbed to his battle with cancer. He was surrounded by his children and grandchildren. During this time of transition, his family asks that you please respect their wishes for privacy and grace. The Simpsons. Again, O.J. Simpson, just learning this, has died.
Newsmax's Sean Kreisman breaking the news yesterday. June of 1994, the country watched the O.J. Simpson chase, in the white Bronco and all that. And then later that year, the O.J. trial started. And for nearly an entire year, almost all of 1995, the O.J. trial dominated television, radio, and print news.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Newsmax legal analyst Alan Dershowitz was in the courtroom that day and for most of the trial, and also spoke directly with O.J. Simpson numerous times during the trial.
What went through your mind the moment that news broke?
Well, I knew he had been sick and suffering from cancer, so it was not a great surprise to me. I was saddened. I didn't know him well personally. Obviously, I worked with him very closely during the trial, visited him in prison, was in the courtroom the moment he tried on the glove, and so I was there for some of the highlights of the case. It's a very important case in American history. It divided the country along racial lines. Also, it showed that a person, whether guilty or innocent, could be framed for a crime. And the police created a piece of evidence against him, a bloody sock, which had blood which was poured from a test tube instead of coming from the crime scene. And the jury saw through that. We exposed it. And he was acquitted not so much on the theory that he was or wasn't innocent or guilty, but on the theory that when the government tampers with evidence, there can't be trust in the rest of the evidence. So it became an important case, and I spoke to him occasionally after the verdict, but not very often.
Can you talk to us maybe about what those conversations were like when he was dealing with these legal challenges? How was he as a client?
He was very smart. He participated very actively in his own defense. I remember being in the side room with him after he tried the glove on and it didn't fit. And he wanted very much to testify. And I said to him, we've already testified. You put on the glove in front of the jury and said it was too small. And you had the best of all possible worlds. You spoke to the jury, you essentially testified, and you weren't cross-examined. So please don't testify. And he didn't testify. There were those like F. Lee Bailey who very much wanted him to testify. But in the end, he didn't. He testified in a civil case, and he lost that. So I think it was the right decision not to testify in the criminal case.
Is that probably the most memorable moment that you would have had with O.J. Simpson, Alan? Again, working through this case and remembering, again, giving him a little bit of advice in terms of testifying?
Yeah. Well, I was sitting literally 5 feet away from him when he tried the glove on. And as soon as I saw that the glove didn't fit, I realized we had a really good chance of winning. And it was the prosecution in the case who made the blunder of trying it on in front of the jury. Under California law, they could have had him try it on outside the jury, and they would have seen it didn't fit, and they wouldn't have then created the embarrassing moment where they haven't put him on in front of the jury, and the jury saw that it didn't fit. So it was a memorable moment. I've had a long career of 60 years, so I've had lots of memorable moments, but this was an important one.
Newsmax legal analyst and Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, who has been a part of so many big trials and American history. I mean, what a luxury, how fortunate it is to have him at our disposal. Most people back then watched our Greta Van Susteren, who worked as a legal analyst for CNN on a show called Burden of Proof. She spoke with her former co-host, Roger Cosick, about it on Newsmax.
The people involved were like Johnny Cochran, Alan Dershowitz, F. Lee Bailey, Robert Shapiro, Robert Kardashian, who is the father of the Kardashian girls. They're not girls anymore. I mean, it was the most unusual collection of people.
And just to say a little footnote history for us. Do you remember with the first show we ever did, A Burden of Proof? You remember Johnny Cochran came on and was our first host. He had just finished arguing the closing argument, and he came on that night for our show, and it was really a spectacular.
Well, actually,
evening.
let me dig a little deeper on that, though. The reason why he came on for our show is because he promised you, and Johnny was good for his word. So I mean, you booked him. He promised you, and he kept his word. I always liked Johnny Cochran. He made everybody in the room feel important.
He was a terrific guy and a terrific lawyer. You might have feelings about what happened in the O.J. Simpson case. I certainly understand that and what role he played. But as a lawyer, you had to admire that he went and he defended his client, and he did exactly what lawyers should do, and was able to convince the jury that the prosecution didn't prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. But besides that, he was a wonderful man, a charitable man, a gracious man, and a great man.
Well, but then a horrible feud between Shapiro and F. Lee Bailey. They were best friends going into the trial, and by the end, you had one of them testifying against the other one, trying to put him in jail in Florida.
Well, I think when you have two people who view life through their prism of importance and greatness, and certainly I've known Robert Shapiro most of my life and like him and think he's a terrific guy. And F. Lee Bailey, we knew that, the importance that he had in the legal community, but it was, two guys. There wasn't enough room on the stage for both of them, and they bounced. And, you and I have both seen that happen.
All right, now let me turn to the prosecution a little bit. Is that I remember that Marsha Clark would walk into restaurants and she'd get a standing ovation in California. I mean, it was so glittery in Hollywood. I've teased you about Hollywood a million times, but it was so glittery.
Well, it did. This suddenly, here you and I are, and suddenly we're on television and we're describing for the world this O.J. Simpson case, which, because of O.J. Simpson and because of the facts of the case, captured the imagination of not just America, but the world. And so, suddenly lawyers were stars. We toiled as lawyers. Nobody knew who we were. But now, because of television and because of, the millions and millions of people that were watching that, people would come in. And as you know, people picked sides. Marsha Clark was for the prosecution. I don't think I'm being hesitant in saying that 99% of the people or 90% of the people believed it and still believe that O.J. Simpson was guilty, and she was the one that was going to, put him in jail.
Former CNN host Roger Cosick on the record with Greta Van Susteren. And right now, many of you are going, oh my God, I watched that during the trial. And if you're not saying that, especially if you're younger, you're probably saying, oh my God, people watched CNN? Another famed attorney, Gloria Allred, represented the family of the victim, OJ's ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson. This is what she had to say yesterday.
I don't mourn for OJ Simpson. I do mourn for Nicole Brown Simpson and her family.
Gloria Allred on ABC TV. A sentiment that was widely echoed for the most part on social media yesterday. I mean, the reaction to this on social media is just insane today as well. All right, back to Washington, where, as I said earlier, all eyes are on Capitol Hill today for the vote on FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The main concern is Section 702, which you've probably been hearing a lot about. It allows U.S. intelligence agencies to spy on the communications of foreign nationals without a warrant, or maybe on political candidates. FBI Director Christopher Wray.
Let me be clear, failure to reauthorize 702 or gutting it with some new kind of warrant requirement would be dangerous and put Americans' lives at risk.
Wray testified on Capitol Hill saying FISA is vital in fighting terrorism and again warned of attacks on the United States.
So we need funding to protect America from terrorism. I touched on this earlier, but there was already a heightened risk of violence in the United States before October 7th. Since then, we've seen a rogues gallery of foreign terrorist organizations call for attacks against Americans and our allies. And given those calls for action, our most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw some kind of twisted inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home. But now, increasingly concerning, is the potential for a coordinated attack here in the homeland, akin to the ISIS-K attack we saw at the Russia concert hall just a couple weeks ago. We also need funding to counter the threat from the People's Republic of China, a government sparing no expense in its quest to hack, lie, cheat, and steal its way to the top as a global superpower and to undermine our democracy and our economic success.
Interesting and concerning comments from the FBI director. For more, we go to Carl Higbie, host of Frontline.
Iran has been at war with the United States since 1979. We haven't been at war with them, but they've definitely been at war with us. Regardless of that fact, while Biden was vice president, America released $400 million in cash on pallets to Iran, delivered in the middle of the night. The first of the $1.7 billion settlement in exchange for prisoners and other agreements. No such arrangements were made under Trump, who did pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. Iran launched no major attacks on us or anybody else in the region while he was president, by the way. But fast forward to Joe Biden. Biden attempts to re-enter the nuclear deal with Iran in 2021, released $6 billion of our money to Iran in exchange for 5 Americans, which is greater than 10 times more than his predecessor Obama gave for 4 prisoners. And what does Iran do with that money?
They failed to feed their people, and they put the IRGC first. Any dollar they have will go towards their violent activity before they deal with their people.
Still don't believe him? Need proof? October 7th. Iranian-backed militants via Gaza attacked Israel, killing over 1,200 people. Simultaneously, Russia, who we are funding a proxy war against in Ukraine, cozies up to Iran. Iran eyes the enemy of their enemy as their friend, and Iran sees this as an opportunity to consume American resources by providing drones to Russia to be used against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Israel is absolutely dismantling Hamas in Gaza, where Iranian support becomes more and more prevalent. Rhetoric between the two heat up, and in response last night, Iran closed down civilian airspace on both sides, threatening escalation if the other side doesn't stand down. Now, Iran includes America in their warning, saying that they're going to make the U.S. a primary target. And then the party that said this.
Yet Trump cast it aside, prompting Iran to restart its nuclear program, become more provocative, and raising the risk of another disastrous war in the region.
Trump was not the problem. Now Joe Biden has set us well on the path to World War III, in part because Israel is being accused of encroaching on land in the Middle East. Really? And Joe Biden, who's committed unlimited support to a non-ally can't decide how to support an actual ally while funding another proxy war simultaneously with absolutely no plan, understanding, or anything of geopolitical aspects, and China is salivating. Confusing, huh? Well, Joe Biden made it that way.
Yeah, so there are so many dots to connect that most Americans don't follow or understand what's really happening if they are trying to follow it, trying to connect the dots. Well, it couldn't be easier to understand than the director of the FBI coming out and saying, yes, we are very concerned Iran or one of its proxy groups could launch an attack on the United States. But Carl Higbie, who was a Navy SEAL and served in Iraq, has some reassuring news as well.
We have 11 carrier battle groups that move faster than a jet ski on our open oceans, surrounded by an untold number of ships above and below the water, some of which carry nuclear ballistic missiles. We can launch planes from anywhere in the world that can fly border to border over Iran in 18 minutes at a top speed of over 2,000 miles an hour. When we choose to launch a missile, it's not whether or not we hit the target, it's which window we want to put it in. And despite this woke military movement you may see on display right now, we do have an arsenal of hard men that will visit you in the middle of the night and kill you without your neighbor even knowing. Our leader may be a feeble old man with no foreign policy success, but if you like this match, you will transfer that command to a bunch of people who are really good at war and waiting for a reason. America was born in conflict over a tax and tea. How do you think we're going to respond, mullahs of Iran, who are just a hair above third world? How are we going to respond to you threatening our sons and daughters? And I just know that if they do light this match, I can pretty much guarantee that the Ayatollah's name is not off the list of targets. And for the record, I am saying that if World War III does start, it's because of Joe Biden.
Thank you, Carl Higbie, I think. That's the most awesome 1-minute description of the U.S. military I think I've ever heard. That is the kind of recruiting video that the military needs. This is former acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker on Wake Up America this morning.
Biden's policies are putting our election system at risk. It's putting our safety of our fellow citizens at risk. We're having this breakout of squatters and people that are, just doing all sorts of crimes, from petty crimes to serious violent crimes. And it was all unnecessary. And so, I think he's raising the alarm. He has been raising the alarm. But, the FBI only has so many resources to track down all the potential threats to, targets all over this country.
Politically speaking, are you surprised that the Biden White House hasn't done more to try and address this? Because let's be honest, we all hope it doesn't happen. But if there is a terrorist attack between now and Election Day on U.S. soil, that would hand Donald Trump the election.
Well, you're right, but it's so very hard. Having been in the chair of the Attorney General, doing that job, understanding protecting our citizens both domestically and internationally, it's more than a full-time job. And obviously they have all sorts of incredible tools at their disposal, but it's still, a lot of it's just policing and just regular sort of beat cops and sheriff's deputies that are out there interacting with the public and making sure that those lines of communication are open with federal law enforcement. But, there's just so much. When you have 8 million or more undocumented people crossing the southern border illegally, it's just almost impossible to keep track of all these folks and to know what they're up to. And, the reports have been pretty clear. People just on the terrorist watch list are in the hundreds that have tried to come in this country, and the known gotaways are in the millions. It is a powder keg. It is going to explode. It's not a matter of when, but where.
Not a matter of when, but where. And that's probably not the first time you've heard that in the last few weeks. Former acting AG Matt Whitaker on Wake Up America with Rob Finnerty.
Wray yesterday, for the very first time, and this was fascinating, he was specific about what could happen here in the U.S. He said, look, you saw what happened at that concert hall in Russia, 140 people killed a couple weeks ago. That could happen here, and it's already happening. Just this week, a teenager in Idaho was plotting an attack at a church while declaring his allegiance to ISIS. Now, thankfully, they caught the guy. But how concerned are you about an attack, a serious attack, on U.S. soil?
Yeah, well, I'm scared to death, like a lot of American citizens, and knowing, how these radical Islamist terrorists view the world, I think we should expect a continued effort. You know, the lone wolf are concerning, but obviously an organized group like you saw in Russia, in Moscow, I think is even more frightening. But, you know, that just increases the vigilance, and we need to make sure we harden all of the targets where people gather. And, you know, we have to remember that, you know, our system of freedoms in the United States comes with, you know, a great responsibility. And it's not only just law enforcement, but every citizen, I think, bears a responsibility to have their eyes open and to pay attention to what's going on around them and their environment.
Very good point.
If you are not already vigilant and paying attention to your surroundings, you better start. I started off with OJ, right? Rob Finnerty takes us back to OJ.
Just a question about OJ Simpson. He died yesterday at 76 of cancer. We all remember that trial in 1995. He was found not guilty. A civil court ultimately did rule that he murdered Ron Goldman and his ex-wife, Nicole Brown. There were cameras in the courtroom throughout that trial. How have cameras changed the courtroom process since that trial 29 years ago? And do you think it's been a good thing to have cameras in the courtroom for a lot of these trials?
Yeah, I do. I think cameras in the courtroom are an important part of our democracy. And I think the more light we have shining on really all forms of government, including our courts, allows citizens to understand. I mean, I think there is in a jury trial, sometimes it's, you know, the lawyers maybe do a little more peacocking than necessary, playing for the cameras. But ultimately, it's those 12 citizens in the box. I think the rest of us should be able to see it. And I think all of these Donald Trump trials should be televised. I think the American people should see how weak the evidence is, how bizarre the legal theories, and how novel they are. And you're going to have one start here on Monday, and you know that we should be able to watch it.
Again, that is former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker on Wake Up America. And he's referencing the Donald Trump hush money trial that is set to begin on Monday, of course. And I remind you, this is a criminal trial. The former president is facing potential jail time. This is all that and a bag of chips for the Democrats, the left, the Trump haters. This is what they're all banking on. This is it. The headline on the Washington Post's email blast this morning said, "Good morning. It's Friday, April 12th, and Donald Trump's first criminal trial is only days away." That was the lead headline. WAPO, Washington Post. This is where we're at, and I'm sure will be a big topic of discussion all weekend long. On Wall Street, mostly red numbers after JP Morgan Chase reported better than expected earnings today, but their influential CEO, Jamie Dimon, warned again of inflation. And Citigroup, another huge bank, reported a drop in profits due to higher operating costs. Get ready for a lot of that. By the way, if you're going to be out house hunting this weekend, mortgage rates rose back above 7% yesterday to a nationwide average of 7.3%. Many Americans have a mortgage rate that is half of that, or maybe even less than half. Rates had dropped to 6.8% for a couple of weeks, and with this week's inflation report, though, experts are not expecting an interest rate cut from the Feds anytime soon. But you never know. As I mentioned, going to be a lot of talk about Donald Trump's trial and the threats from Iran, as well as everything else on all the shows all weekend long. Keep up with it on Newsmax. Make sure you're streaming on Newsmax Plus. Don't forget about Wake Up America Weekend Edition. There's Saturday and Sunday Agenda, America Right Now, the Gorka Reality Check, Wendy Bell, and much more. I'm Tony Marino. This is the Newsmax Daily. Thank you for listening. See you right back here on Monday. Have a fantastic and safe weekend, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Kelly over at Newsmax. The Newsmax people have been really, really terrific. Newsmax has been terrific.
President Trump is right. Millions are tired of Fox, and they're switching to Newsmax Plus. It's the fastest growing streaming service in America. You don't need woke Disney and Hulu anymore. Just get Newsmax Plus. Watch the best shows like Greg Kelly, Rob Schmidt, Greta Van Susteren, and Eric Bolling. And get incredible analysis from Dick Morris, Alan Dershowitz, Carrie Lake, Mike Huckabee, and more. It's free to start. So go to NewsmaxPlus.com now to sign up and watch Newsmax anytime, anywhere.